The media landscape in the Middle East has seen big changes in the 21st century. Under Saddam Hussein, Iraq was a police state with one state-owned television channel. Now it has a multiplicity of outlets. Egyptian journalism hit its high water mark after Tahrir Square, only to be forced back underground by the Sisi government. And then there's Lebanon. There's no shortage of diversity on the airwaves there, and never really has been. Beyond the sheer number of channels in a country of just 4 million, it's the ownership of those outlets and inevitably the politics that tell the journalistic story. The political and sectarian factors complicate the reporting of everything, from the war next door in Syria to much more mundane local stories, such as a garbage strike that Beirut suffered through last year. It turns out that in Lebanon, even waste management is political. The Listening Post's Tarek Nafi now on the Lebanese media space, the complexities, the challenges, and the people pushing for change.
Your first lesson in understanding Lebanese Media 101 has to be a class on national politics. Lebanon's government is based on a complex power-sharing agreement, or national pact, that divides positions of leadership between each of the country's religious groups and sects. The president must be a Maronite Christian, although the office has gone unfilled for 2 years. The prime minister, a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of parliament, a Shiite Muslim. There's no government quite like it, and the media is in some ways its mirror image.
Lebanon's landscape is free, yet censored at the same time. It's free because we have a democratic country, of course. It's censored because we have an extremely sectarian establishment, and thus the media landscape is very similar to the political landscape.
Think of a puzzle, and think of Lebanon as this puzzle with each piece representing a different religious sect. And with each piece also having a few patrons, a few political groups that dominate it. It also is reflected in the media.
Lebanon's biggest TV stations all speak for different sections of society. On the Christian side, you have channels like LBC, formerly the mouthpiece of Lebanon's Civil War-era Christian militia, the Lebanese forces. Then there's OTV, owned by the Free Patriotic Movement Party, and MTV, owned by another Christian politician, Gabriel Mour. Speaking for Shia Muslims is Al-Manar, the outlet of the powerful militia Hezbollah, as well as NBN, owned by Speaker of Parliament, Nabi Berri. Then there's Future TV, which along with the Future political movement, speaks for Lebanon's Sunni Muslims. It's owned by Saad Hariri, a billionaire politician and former prime minister. Most of these channels have at some stage received foreign funding, which also plays a role in their political agendas.
Whenever they start the news, each sectarian channel or medium will sort of present the sectarian point of view of the news events. So you find out the same news event covered differently, even the same facts interpreted differently by different channels.
But what's the sectarian view of a garbage crisis? As trash began piling up on the streets of Beirut last year, a non-sectarian protest movement emerged. It had its own hashtag, طلعت ريحتكم, you stink, and took aim at the entire political class. Broadcasters, used to reporting on issues where the political fault lines are clearly established, had to make a choice about how to frame their coverage. One of Lebanon's few secular channels, privately owned Al Jadid, decided to get behind the movement.
I would say we, for the first time in Al Jadid's history, we came out and we completely endorsed the movement.
إنه دائما لما عم بيكون في مواجهة بين القوى الأمنية وما بين المعتصمين بيكون الحراك أصلب وأقوى.
So we were very clear that those youth that were in the street, that were calling for change, that were calling for the garbage to be removed, represent us and we represent them. We received phone calls just as everyone else was receiving phone calls. The difference is we did not listen to those trying to convince us that the movement is not worthy of covering.
What happened last summer was really interesting because a few media outlets started to cover the protests, not really picking sides and picking favorites, but actually attacking the entire political establishment in the country. And that really wasn't convenient for most TV channels to cover, because each one channel wants to cover something that makes their politician, their owner, look good. And no one was looking good here. So the media was actually not just covering it from far away, but they were actually down with the protesters, and so they got to feel what the protesters were feeling. So now there are relationships between a lot of activists and prominent journalists, to the extent where some of the old media are very angry and are calling some of these private channels as kind of accomplices to activists.
This is LBC News anchor Dima Sadek, stopping for a selfie with one protester. She also went on France 24's Arabic service to defend the protesters against accusations they'd turned violent.
لأن المتظاهرين كانوا جدا منضبطين إلى أقصى الحدود لم يستفزوا حتى القوى الأمنية.
But while Al Jadid and LBC amplified the protesters' voices, other channels began spinning a message against them. Demonstrators were blamed for the destruction of downtown Beirut.
هذه هي بيروت التي يتغنى بها الشرق ويحكي عنها الغرب. أصبحت اليوم شبه مدينة أشباح، الخراب في كل مكان.
And a narrative began to take hold about El Mandasoun, infiltrators in the crowd.
بعض المندسين حضروا إلى ساحة الاعتصام مستغلين عواطف الناس وغضبهم من الواقع المرير.
Suddenly we started hearing conspiracy stories and rumors in Lebanon somehow take a life of their own and become facts and become so potent.
حتى أن المحال التجارية حاول المندسون الدخول.
This created some reaction on the ground. Suddenly fights broke out within the protesters. And this is where many people in Lebanon said, oh, hold on a second, like we're not here to go down protests and then fight together. We don't want to be part of it. And this is to a large extent an example of how the media landscape, the dominant political groups were able to tear it apart. These media institutions are an extension to this political status quo. It would be naive to think that any movement that would come and ask for change in this political landscape will not be attacked.
It's hard to escape political bias in a country where most TV outlets speak exclusively to one section of society. Nothing captures that more than the war in neighboring Syria. Whether you're watching Hezbollah's Al-Manar with its pro-government stance,
يشعر الحلبيون بحرقة جراء أسلوب تكفيري همجي غايته التهجير الجماعي,
or Future TV, whose coverage is more sympathetic to anti-government rebels.
هذا وتواصل آلة القتل الروسية الفتك بالمدنيين في حلب.
Lebanese audiences are sophisticated enough to see beyond the spin, and the Youth Think movement has helped enlarge the space for new voices, activists and citizen journalists. Platforms like the Beirut Report and Beirut Syndrome are shaping a discussion online that the mainstream media have traditionally ignored.
Just the idea of looking at corruption, at looking at how real estate deals are being made by politicians, how they're kind of destroying the coast of the country, how all these kind of issues of public space, issues, for example, of secular marriage. These kind of issues have been popularized so much by these activists and bloggers that they've become mainstream issues. So kind of, I think the activism is in a way informing what the public debate is in the country.
The landscape has been changing, especially in the past 15 years, with the advance of new media, with the advance of social media, with different political and social movements in the Arab world, pushing people towards being more informed, creating their own information, citizen journalism. I mean, you have a lot of strong bloggers in Lebanon and the Arab world now. You have people who have hundreds, if not thousands, of followers, and they tweet on a daily basis, give different perspective.
It would be naive to say that the reinvention of Lebanon's media space is anything more than a work in progress. Political divisions here run deep. But some new voices are being heard, and they're chipping away at a media system that sees its audience through a strictly sectarian lens. There are many Lebanese who want something better, and in a country that celebrates its diversity and trumpets its freedoms, it's nothing more than what the people deserve.